I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
Capella University is rethinking higher education. With its game-changing FlexPath learning format, you can earn your degree on your schedule and fit your education seamlessly into your life. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network. Today on the James Altucher Show.
So you kind of almost want to take each scene and inject it with as many what-ifs as possible.
Correct.
To drive people to the next scene.
Brilliant. That's exactly right. Perspective is everything in storytelling. You have to believe in the message of your idea.
Brian Grazer, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
And Brian, I have to say, this is like meeting one of my heroes, only because you have been the creator of so many stories that have moved me from one stage of life to the next. Like without you, there would be this gaping hole in my life. You know, there would be no Apollo 13. There'd be no, A Beautiful Mind. There'd be no Splash. There would be no Arrested Development. But these are my favorite stories of all time.
Wow, thanks.
So, and then now you wrote this book, which I really have incorporated into my daily life. A Curious Mind, The Secret to a Bigger Life, or The Secret of a Bigger Life. And it's this idea that you have basically used the concept of curiosity, your own curiosity, as almost like a superpower that's propelled you from, let's say, a childhood of angst and dyslexia to being this, super producer in Hollywood. So
thank you.
I want to ask you first about Hollywood, then about the book.
Sure, great.
They're related.
They are interrelated, absolutely.
So
just as in the book, the vertical of curiosity is sort of a pure force, is interrelated to storytelling, and they cross over at certain times, and that's kind of what the book is about. It's about how they merge.
Well, okay, tell me about that.
You should go to... Really?
Yeah, tell me about how curiosity and story, and I read all about that in the book, but explain that to, what do you mean by curiosity and storytelling intersect?
Well, there's a lot of ways to talk about that, and in the book I have really specific examples, but I kind of, as you know, I grew up in the San Fernando Valley. I was just a valley kid. I lived in the radius of about 3 blocks and had lived in a very small world. But as I was getting out of college, I started thinking, because I didn't know what to do. I thought I'd go to law school, but I stumbled across the idea of just the what if in life. My first real big what if was, what if I met a mermaid? And that became Splash. But
Was that like, how did you think, what if I met a mermaid? Was that like a sexual fantasy, or what was the background of that?
Well, okay.
Because Tom Hanks did fall in love with Daryl Hannah. It did propel Daryl Hannah, to be this icon.
Well, basically what happened is it was less about, it began with, what if I met the perfect girl? Because I was in Los Angeles, and as kind of an innocent 24-year-old kid, I was just on the verge of producing a movie for television, and it was called Zuma Beach, The Day in the Life of Zuma Beach. And I produced that, and I went from being just this sort of innocent, naive valley boy to that guy plus being a producer.
I'm going to ask you a naive question.
Yes.
What do you mean you produced it? Like, just for everybody at home who sees the word producer on every show, but what do you mean? What did you do?
Well, what I did on that movie, Zuma Beach, and of course on Splash, is I had the original idea. I thought to myself, well, what would the day in the life of a beach look like? Because I'd seen American Graffiti, and I thought, okay, that was a 24-hour period essentially. And I thought, well, what would if you did sort of an autopsy on, a day in the life of the beach scene in Los Angeles? What does that look like to me? And then I gave life to what that idea looked like, and to me, it's not just what the words are. It's like, what does that fantasy look like? Or what does that look like to me? And then I create scenes on what that looks like to me. And then I write it. And then at the time, I wasn't in the Writers Guild, so I would just do registered mail to myself, and that would protect me from being or having that idea stolen. And so by giving life to it, I then hired a screenwriter. It was John Carpenter, oddly enough, and all of a sudden I was produced. I became the guy that was the guiding visionary of that piece called Zuma Beach. So as a producer, what you do is you have a creative vision as to what it should look like, what it's emotionally designed to do for a viewer, and then that has to be in alignment with a fiscal vision. And so those two things have to be in alignment with each other, a creative vision and a fiscal vision, and then that's what it means to produce something.
And so on the creative side, you have the story, you hire the writers, the directors, you find the actors or the casting directors, and find the places, the settings, the whole thing. On the fiscal side, you have to go around from studio to studio with your hand out and get money.
Yeah, with your hand out and get the money. And then they say, well, how much do you need? And you say, $3 million. And they go, no, we'll give you $1 million. Then you say, well, do you mean you'll really give me $1 million? And if they say, yes, I mean, I'll give you $1 million. Then you have to figure out how to make what you thought was $3 million for $1 million.
and then how do you make money? Are you making money on how well it does, or do you make money on the difference between what you spend and what you save?
You can make money all those different ways. It's a little less about what it cost and what you saved, and it's more about a fee. So it's the fee, your services fee. So whether it's the movie for TV or the feature movie Splash or Night Shift, you get a fee, and then you would get a profit participation. In television, well, they both apply. In television, for movies for TV, you didn't really get a profit participation. In movies, you got a profit participation. So you can make money both ways.
And so a lot of things sort of kicked off for you. And by the way you just described, your vision for the autopsy for a beach, you were asking out loud questions.
Yes.
So it seems like, and you talk about this a lot in the book, among many things that you talk about what curiosity does for someone, curiosity drives storytelling.
Yes. Curiosity propels storytelling. And all stories, incidentally, need propulsion. So it's not only creates the story, but it gives life to energy. And energy is what stories need.
What do you mean by energy?
Energy means, the story where you have energy would mean you have a clear understanding of where the story starts, and then even before you start making it, you have to have a really clear understanding as to the trajectory of where that story is going and exactly what the end looks like in final.
So you start with that
I start with that template. I start with the template of, well, for me personally, Brian Grazer, I was always a title junkie, like a title whore. Like, so I would basically feel like if I could come up with any title, if I can come up with a title, I can then create a story. That's just the way I began my career. I thought, because marketing was so important in these movies for TV and, of course, movies themselves. But in the world of movies for television, you really had to have a sexy kind of premise or sexy title. There was a time where Women in Jeopardy were 50% of all the movies on television. And then that would change, would go through a different cycle. But so basically, energy is when the scenes have a lot going on in them, and they're also leading you to the next scene, and ultimately creates enough curiosity within the viewer where they're going, what does that next scene look like? What's going to happen to our protagonist? What is the antagonist going to do to the protagonist? All those what if questions live inside each scene. And if they don't, you have kind of a dull movie.
So you kind of almost want to take each scene and inject it with as many what ifs as possible.
Correct.
To drive people to the next scene.
Brilliant. That's exactly right. Exactly right. And we've all seen movies where they don't have that. And you go, well, I'm not even curious about what's going on or what is going to happen. I'm not interested. Well, there's a point where you lose interest, and that's because there's no longer curiosity.
And so let's translate that for a second into some other area of life. Where does the same notion apply in some other aspect of life, whether it's relationships or job or career? Where can you say, yes, okay, we're going to take this arc and put a lot of what ifs here?
Dating.
Okay, I agree with that.
I always tried to make my curiosity conversations, the conversations that are synthesized in this book, A Curious Mind. Every 2 weeks, I would meet somebody that was expert in something other than entertainment, science, medicine, politics, religion, all art forms, all those. So I always tried to make each one of those meetings like the best date I ever had in my life. But going back to your initial question, I would say dating, because when you have the magic, the alchemy of that perfect date, you lose track of time. You're living in the what if. You're looking into her eyes or his eyes, and you're saying, well, what interests you? What is your reason? What are your purposes in life? What matters to you? You're constantly getting to the heartbeat of things that are going on between you and that person on your first date. And when you lose track of time and you lose track of even the action of asking the question because it's just existing, it's propelling itself without thought, that often is your perfect date, which is commonly known as just being in the present.
No, it's a really good point that you mentioned in the book, people like talking about themselves. So if you're on a date and you're really sincerely curious, not only is it well-mannered, but they're going to enjoy the date more.
Yeah, they're going to enjoy the date more. There's no question about that.
But let me and this.
I had this epiphany. Do you want to say your thought or my?
No. Go with your
My thought is this: is that for the first 15 years of being a movie producer, I produced only just only comedies. Night Shift, Splash, Parenthood, Nutty Professor, Liar Liar, 3 Jim Carrey movies, The Grinch, and there was a few of my movies, when I watched the rough cuts in the earlier movies, I was thinking, wow, that's really funny. And I'm watching the rough cut, I'm going, that's really funny. There was a movie where I didn't think at all. It was impulsive. I laughed. There was no space between what I was looking at and me involuntarily laughing. And later I thought, wow, that was actually really funny. But the time you think it's funny, it's not that funny because you're thinking. You can't. So that's the same thing.
Which movie was the one that made you laugh so much?
The one that made me laugh so much was the first Nutty Professor with Eddie Murphy. It was really, really funny to me.
Tom Shadyack's been on this podcast.
He's great.
Yeah. So he's great. Directed a lot of those.
He's very, 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 very gifted movie director. He directed for me the first Nutty Professor, which was the best one. I shouldn't say, but was. And Liar Liar.
Yeah.
a huge Jim Carrey movie, and he's great.
And I'll tell you, for me, on television, where I couldn't stop laughing, and it's the only series I've probably watched 5 times over, is Arrested Development.
Wow,
it's just
thank
genius.
you. Thank you.
I mean, there's so many different layers to that show that I don't even know if most people get. Like, you have to know Ron Howard's career, like his entire career to get
most people don't get it. And by the way, I produced it. I didn't get it. They was smarter than I was.
Why? In what way? What was something?
There were so many stories and so much inside stuff, and it was just the amount of stories that were going on, the amount of characters, the amount of stories, and honestly, and it was subtle and dry, and I wasn't that kid that got all those stories. I could appreciate it, but I didn't, like you, get every detail.
I might not have gotten every detail too.
I bet you did.
Maybe I have to watch it a 6th time over.
Yeah. What I did in our last season, I thought, along with 20th Century Fox, I said it was like a conspiracy against Mitch, the creator. I said, maybe we should, without telling Mitch, find a way to have fewer stories and focus on fewer characters. But then there was this core audience that was like you, that was just so digging it. And when the network was going to cancel it, we had people picket Fox Studios. I can't
understand why they canceled it. It was the best.
Now they want it
ever.
back. Everybody wants it. It was really good. It was really good.
So I want to get back to I actually want to get back later to curiosity and dating, but I want to get back to what's the core of the book, which is you doing these what you call curiosity conversations, which is just genius. And in fact, I kind of revolve my entire this podcast show around that idea, which is that this podcast is not really about anything other than me calling up people I'm fascinated by and going over to wherever they are and having what you call a curiosity conversation with them. So maybe describe a little bit what you mean by it and what it is, like how to do it.
Okay. Well, what you just said, that urge, that thing in you is that is the exact same thing that I access on, which is, and I'll say what you said, but it's just about being interested in disruption. Like I'm interested in getting out of my comfort zone all the time, almost to the point that that's the thing that makes me comfortable, because I feel like when I'm out of my comfort zone, I am learning. I'm forced to think. I'm forced to have a conversation that moves you, and you moves, and conversely, you're moving me. It almost becomes a biochemical event, and that's kind of what a first date is. It's the best date becomes a biochemical event, and it clearly sometimes moves you to a biochemical event. So, yeah. But so in any event, I'm just really interested in learning. I'm interested in growing. I'm interested in, and if I can apply it to a story, great. But mostly I just want to improve the way I curate my life.
That's an interesting way to put it. What do you mean by that?
It helps by these interesting experiences that take me out of my comfort zone, by having to try to speak to a scientist or Edward Teller and not be on his level, but try my best to create something that we can access on. Where there's some mutuality, which is hard. It's a struggle to create mutuality with people that have their level of expertise or the way they see the world is so different than you. But there's something inside of that person and yourself that has to merge. And you just have to, and the goal is to try to find it. And why do I want to find it? And how does that curate my life? Because it makes I start my day on the baseline of being pretty grateful. And I want to fill my life with incidents that make me grow and allow me to celebrate the beauty of my life better than before. So when I walk into a room that I used to where I wouldn't maybe talk to people, or I'd be afraid they wouldn't talk to me, I can actually enter rooms with a tremendous amount of confidence. It doesn't mean I'm the loudest, most outgoing guy. It just means that I approach it with a lot of confidence because I've had many conversations with many different types of people, and I think I'm interesting. And by thinking I'm interesting probably helps make me be interesting.
Well, let me ask you.
And it's a charitable gesture. It's just a good vibe. It's a good vibe to ask other people, like what's up with you or what's interesting to you. That sounded a little aggressive, but it didn't mean it to be. Yeah.
But you link curiosity to confidence, and is that because you know in any situation you've exercised this curiosity muscle enough that you could find something to get them talking?
Yes, it is that.
Mm-hmm.
It's exactly that. I feel kind of like that I've done it in so many different ways. I've survived so many different curiosity conversations.
And survive is a good way to put it, by the way, because you mentioned in the book, sorry to interrupt, you mentioned in the book at least two situations, Edward Teller and Isaac Asimov, where you really felt bad at the end of those conversations.
Terrible.
But you learned from that badness, too.
Yeah.
From the content and quality of that badness.
Yeah. I mean, with Edward Teller, you know, he was a great physicist, and of course he was the father of the hydrogen bomb, and it was so uncomfortable. I just felt he did everything to reduce my self-worth. He did a very good job of reducing my self-worth. But when I got out of that experience and into my car, I just reframed it. I just thought, wow, this was really horrible. I felt like a dope. But I will figure out a way to do this better, or I can, or the pain of that is an additive in my life because I know I can kind of survive that pain. I just recently, 2 weeks ago, went to Moscow for like an urgent meeting with very important people, and it was a complete wipeout. But I gained a lot out of it for sure. I mean, so much, and I really can't talk about it.
How was that wipeout?
I haven't talked about it publicly. It was just a wipeout because I was meeting very important people with the only purpose of just having one of these conversations, and I made it clear that I didn't want to ask anything of them, and nor should they ask anything of me. And it didn't turn out to be that, and so it was uncomfortable.
Like they thought you were making a movie about them?
A version of that, yeah. And I all these curiosity conversations are to be with no agenda, really. The only agenda is just personal growth, connection, growth, empathy. You know, it's these abstract things. You know, things that sort of converts to like what would be called divergent thought. I mostly think of it as that each one of these conversations that I have represents a dot in a larger constellation of dots, and somehow, some way they do connect. Sometimes years, sometimes 10 years.
By connect, you mean kind of ideas from, let's say, talking with Russian oligarchs combined with talking with ballerinas might somehow result in a combination that's a movie or
either
or
a movie
idea.
Or just an insight or just an insight that enables me to survive that later conversation. Or what they always do is provide me with an insight into perspective. And perspective is everything in storytelling. It's everything is perspective. I mean, in A Beautiful Mind, what happened is I bought the book A Beautiful Mind with the thematic intention of trying to make a movie that would help destigmatize mental disability. And that thematic intention existed 10 years before I even met John Nash and started to make this, was going to make this movie. But I realized that there was a movie already, and several movies made. One was called Dominic and Eugene, which is an objective look at schizophrenia. And I thought, wow, what am I going to do that's different? And in the case of Connecting Dots, I'd met a woman named Veronica de Negre who was tortured in Chile and survived the torture in real time by creating an alternate reality, another story that she could live in while she was being tortured. So I brought that thought, that insight forward 15 years when I bought this book, A Beautiful Mind, and I realized the way to make this movie a really palpable and emotional experience would be to shift the perspective and make it, instead of an objective perspective, a first-person subjective experience. So in a schizophrenic mind, there are many alternate realities, and I would begin the movie in an alternate reality, and therefore would draw the audience in a way that is really, really emotional and visceral. Now, it could have failed, but it didn't.
Let's stop to take a quick break. We'll be right back. You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get two memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply. 'Cause, 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 'cause,
can cross your fingers and all your toes during a data center migration. You can knock on wood, pluck a dozen four-leaf clovers, or look to your lucky stars for a successful office expansion. You could hold your breath, shut your eyes, and say all the well wishes to help avoid cyber attacks. But none of that truly helps you. Because next level moments need the next level network. With the security, reliability, and expertise to take your business further. AT&T Business, the network you can rely on.
A lot of these movies that you've worked on, particularly, all of these have been huge successes. They start off with this kind of idea that maybe the public might want to see, like, oh, it's very interesting to see Nobel Prize winning guy like John Nash in a movie. But then there's this deeper layer of mental illness and maybe another deeper layer of how do you find romance amidst this mental illness as well, and have a.
And how does romance become the coping mechanism?
Right, and the same thing happens in Apollo 13. It's not about a rocket malfunctioning. It's about, oh my God, I'm scared to death because I'm in the middle of outer space and I have to solve this problem. And we can all relate to that a little bit.
That's 100% right. I mean, and never on any podcast or talk shows anyone ever said that particular thing. That was, for me, people think it's about space. I thought it was about aerodynamics. I think about the space race, the Apollo program. To me, it was only about human resourcefulness. That was the only thing I could relate to.
So it's almost like you not only use what if to get from scene to scene, but also to get from layer to deeper layer. Like what is another real story we could tell slightly deeper here?
Exactly. It's about feeling. I mean, like occasionally, I do public speaking periodically, and they'll say, "Oh, you're a movie producer or television producer," and I always just say, "I'm my occupation. I'm just in the feelings business," because I really am, because when you communicate filmically, if you're not igniting feeling, you're not really communicating. You're not really reaching somebody. But I think that when feelings are ignited or emotion is ignited because of an image in a scene, or sometimes it's a word, then you're really communicating. Something's happening. You're igniting something that becomes indelible in human beings.
But taking even a step back further, look at the beginning of your career. It started simply because you would go up to Lou Wasserman, or you would go up to Ron Howard and say, "Hey, what are you working on? What can we do together?" You would start these curiosity conversations with these people who became instrumental in building, this enormous career for you.
Definitely.
And so let's say I'm listening to this and I'm commuting to work or sitting in my cubicle. And I think to myself, I have all these opinions that have guarded me forever from stepping out of my comfort zone. I don't have that curiosity muscle exercise. What's the first step I could take? What can I do today?
The easiest thing to do is connect with. You have to have total authenticity and sincerity. But it's just, in other words, it can't be a by the numbers thing that we see our kids do and stuff like that. It's you have to connect to somebody that's in your vision right away. Like literally, there's got to be someone that's in your office or works for somebody else that you actually look at, and that you create a set point through some eye contact, and you actually ask real questions of that you didn't ask, that you just took them for granted. They're just part of their muzak, part of the environment. You or your neighbor across the street. You change your body. Everything has to change. Your body language, your eye contact, and you have to really be earnestly. You have to be into a real conversation with somebody.
And to be
just
honest,
do that, and then you can start creating lists. Like I started to create lists. Like a tennis player, I want to meet. I mean, I was a list crazy. I would see someone's name, or some little story in a magazine. I'd go, "Oh, I'm dying to meet that person," or I love that subject of genetics. Who is in the world of genetics that would interest me? What part of genetics actually does interest me? Is it about my own personal genetics? Or is it about how genetics works and our understanding in the future, like Craig Ventnor? Or what is it we want to know?
So you start asking questions of yourself.
I ask questions of myself. It's just peeling an onion. It's constant, like saying, okay, what you ask yourself, what if, or what is that like, or what does it look like? And then you get an answer. Then you go, well, what does that look like? In the case of Splash, I said, how do I meet, literally, because I was in Los Angeles, how do I actually meet a great girl? Because I dated a bunch of girls that were not great girls because I was the Valley guy that became a producer. So the guy that couldn't get any dates was getting an endless amount of dates, but I found that they were all kind of the same. There were, in my case in Los Angeles, they were somewhat vacuous, beautiful and vacuous. If you could get them a condo or a car, that made life better. It was just, I fell into this category of girls, and I thought, how do I escape this category and meet someone that has more purity to them? Like, when they speak to you, they're speaking the truth. You're not being handled. It's not a packaged experience.
So so I'm asking Brian Grazer for advice here. Like, how do I find that?
How do you find that girl?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first you have to define what that girl.
What are the qualities that you look for, and then how do you find
generosity. I thought to myself, I want someone that has a generous spirit. I like a girl. Okay, I want a pretty girl, beautiful girl. Everyone wants a beautiful girl, but okay, there's other things that have to be part of that. Beautiful. They have to be honest. They have to have a conscience.
What do you mean by that?
A conscience where they realize if they say things to you, that everything is a consequence. If they lie to you, there's a consequence. You're going to feel bad, or they're going to feel bad. If they have a conscience, they'll feel bad too. You start defining, like what I start defining it. So in the world out of fantasy, I thought a teacher or a nurse. Started thinking, where am I going to meet a nurse? Live near UCLA. I can drive over to UCLA. I'll walk the campus. You see girls that are dressed like nurses because they are nurses, and you just say, "Hey," because you really want to know. I'm sitting here looking at you. Or you go to Cedars-Sinai Hospital. That's 2 blocks from it's a mile from my office. You walk around there. You eat lunch at places like Conda Veneta. It's a restaurant right across from Cedars-Sinai Hospital. I guarantee you're going to meet doctors and nurses.
And then what do? You go up to, you're sitting by yourself. This is the hard part.
Okay, you're sitting by yourself. It's a little harder in the restaurant, but you can eat. You're sitting by yourself in the restaurant. You look around. You could say hi to someone else. Or you could it's easier when people are walking the street in the daytime. Nighttime is a bad time because people feel unsafe. The daytime. So you say, hey, you don't say, give me directions. That's a fake thing. But you say, I can't invent the line right now. But I did. Like when I was single, I could walk around the block here in Beverly Hills, get 10 girls' phone numbers, and 5 would go out with me.
So this was almost, again, like a way of
this
exercising.
has gotten kind of crazy, but I'm okay.
No, I like
okay.
this. This is perfect.
Well, I thought, so I would have categories. There were nurses, doctors. I thought nurses,
Wouldn't doctors be too busy? Like they're going to be working 80 hours a week?
I never got into the space of being too busy, but it was more just, is there a chemistry? But they could be too busy. I hadn't thought of that. They probably are. Athletes are good. They're also very busy too. Real athletes are pretty busy, but they're dedicated. So, and if you're dedicated, you're usually connected to some truth, I found. People that you just think of these traits that turn you on or that make you feel safe or attractive to you, So like I said, generosity, a generous spirit. I think people that want to teach are interesting because you're giving away part of yourself. That's kind of beautiful. So I like those things. So I thought of those things, versions of those things, created an embodiment of a character. And then I thought, okay, but that's just, how can I make this really theatric? Like what would bring a fantasy? And I thought, well, every girl wants to be a mermaid. And as a dude, I of course would like to meet a mythic character like that. So then I think, then I thought about there's a Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale dealing with a mermaid. And I thought, what is that? And then I started thinking of that and then thought of offshoots of mermaids because there's a popularity to mermaids. There have been many stories. And I thought, okay, I'll superimpose this mythological symbol on top of this definition of a girl that I think is cool, and or that I think admire and would be interested in, then that became my girl.
And you started pitching this idea. Every studio was saying no. And I like how, again, you used curiosity to bridge the gap between no and yes without feeling resentment along the way. You were persistent.
I was really
but with
persistent.
Curiosity.
Yeah, I was persistent with curiosity. So basically
like, how do you get over the no with curiosity?
Okay, this is how you do it. You have to ask, you get a lot of no's, an endless amount of no's, and you realize I've gotten so many no's that why have I gotten the no's? Then
and you don't resent anybody giving you the no, even if they just hang up the phone on you.
I only resent it if they say no and they have to tell me why they gave me no. Like if they have to break down my ego or confidence or self-esteem. So if I say, why are you saying no, then they can say it. But if they just voluntarily go, well, they say no, and then they tell you, then they try to break you down. I'm not digging that very much.
Because they're breaking you down because they're building themselves up, like they're teaching you a lesson? Or?
It's more, no, I think it's more about that they don't want you to win at it because then they look wrong. Then it breaks them down. So in any event, but you have to recontextualize things. So when I got, 50 no's or 75 no's on A Mermaid, I started thinking, why are they saying no? And then I think to myself, well, maybe the perspective of the story is wrong. Maybe it shouldn't be from the girl's perspective. It shouldn't be from like, what if I get out of my mer world and meet a mortal? Maybe it should be that we don't think about that perspective, but we think solely our introduction to the movie is through the guy's perspective. You change perspectives. I always found like recontextualization is the best way to overcome no's. So when someone says no, you find a different way to ask the question.
And what if they don't let you ask the question again?
Actually, famously, somewhat famously, there was an executive at United Artists at the time that said that
she called you a pest.
She called me a pest, exactly. Anthea Silver.
I slam the door and you come in through the window is what she said.
Good memory, exactly. I slammed it. Brian Grazer, oh my God, you slam the door, he comes in the window. You can't. You lock the window, she comes in the chimney. That doesn't work. He digs a hole under the building.
But not everyone can do that. Like, what gave you kind of, again, the confidence to think, okay, I'm going to go back to this person who said no to me 5 times?
Because I know nobody knows. I'm certain nobody knows. I think no is only a temporary point of view.
There's almost a spiritual aspect of this. That
definitely.
The idea that nobody knows, that there's more questions than answers, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, good.
And so
yes.
Is that that gives you the confidence to kind of keep approaching?
Well, you have to believe in the message of your idea. So I was always, in the Mermaid movie, I always believed in the message. The message was love. But I thought it's possible that I'm not expressing my message well. I thought that maybe I have to shift the perspective of the exterior of the message. So there's a message that lives inside the interior of the story. The exterior of the story are the characters and the story itself. So I thought maybe I have to change the story, or maybe my representation of the story is not high quality enough. That means like the way I tell it and or the way I wrote it.
There's a little bit more, and I can see this. There's like a playful aspect to you. Like I can see it. So it must be when you're going back to the woman at United Artists, it's not like, oh, I have something else to tell you about this. You must have like played a little bit with like, hey, I'm back again.
Yeah, I have to make fun. You have to have fun.
Yeah.
You have to wrap it in some sort of fun things. You can be
so she's willing to listen again.
Yeah, you can be self-effacing. You can know that she's going to her car at 6:00 at night, and you just happen to be at the car. Oh my God, I'm at your car. This is your car. That's how I met Lou Wasserman. I mean, you just have to have fun with it. You don't want to be. I mean, I have people that are pushy on me because they either know that I'm a movie producer, and or they know that I've written a book about curiosity, and I give speeches, and they say, "You've got to meet me," and then but they don't do it the right way. And you have to have fun with it, and you have to do research. You can't just be, you got to meet me. You have to research Brian Grazer, or conversely, I have to research that person that I want to meet. You have to know what interests them. If you're just asking, if it's just you're being forceful, that's not attractive. But if you know something about them and about what they like and what they want or what interests them, or they know music, but you know more, or, those things that are additive to them. I've had a lot of people say, I really want to work for you. I go, why? He goes, because I know I could learn a lot. I want to go, that's not a good reason for me. That's a good reason for you. If you think you could teach me a lot, then I can say, what will you teach me? Then we keep going on that conversation. But just because you can learn a lot, that's a very selfish perspective.
It seems like there's almost an evolutionary aspect to this, because there's two aspects of curiosity that you've spoken about, which has sort of driven the development of the human race, which is storytelling. Because for millions of years, how do we communicate? There's danger in the forest. There was no written language, so you had to tell stories. What's beyond, what's in the jungle, and curiosity drives that fear almost, and those stories. And then human connection. You talked about a little with the dating, but you describe it a lot in the book as kind of this hidden, but perhaps the strongest power of curiosity is this, ability to connect with people. And and again, and then there's another part of the book which I also found fascinating, which is that nobody else talks about curiosity. There's all these studies about innovation or about connection or about storytelling. Nobody mentions curiosity in these studies. Why is that? Are we afraid to admit that we don't know things?
Well, I think we are. I think that in the way I grew up, and I think that public education doesn't really allow for a lot of curiosity because it's and this is not it's more a judgment of the efficiency of the system and less about the qualitative part of the system. Meaning that when you have 30 kids in a class or 30 to 50 kids in a class, there's not a lot of time for kids raising their hand and every question being asked, or curiosity itself being nurtured in the way that we're talking about.
Maybe because they're also teaching by feeding facts, which they're then tested on in standardized tests.
Yeah.
So they're fed answers rather than questions.
And it's not really about how the fact works in life or the fact's application. It's just about getting that fact right.
Right.
So, and I think that we just, Americans, and I would just say that I think that our educational system is a little less about saying I don't know. I don't know wasn't popular. And now it's on its way to being more, in the vogue. I guess I don't know, but I think saying I don't know was not a popular thing to say.
And
by the way, I didn't say that very well. But
but I get it, because I think about it from the point of view of a newscaster or a news show. You're not really allowed to say I don't know. If someone goes on a show as like a pundit, they're not really allowed to say I don't know. It's still part of the culture.
Yeah.
So like the media culture or the way we get our news and information, nobody says I don't know on TV.
Yeah. And by the way, just look at the presidential race. They think they're every answer. They either know everything and have an opinion about it, or they're asked a question and they answer with an answer that is completely unrelated to the question.
Right.
So no one's benefiting from that.
So of all the curiosity conversations you've had, and you've listed like hundreds in the back of the book. I have two quick questions to sort of wrap this up. One is, what was the biggest gap between the sort of fame or esteem of the person you were talking to and yourself? So now as you've gotten older, it's probably leveled out a lot. But when you were younger, let's say you were in your 20s trying to talk to
Jonas Salk.
Yeah. What was like the biggest gap ever in all these curiosity conversations? If that could be quantified.
Okay, there's a bunch of, well, the greatest disparities early on were, of course, was Jonas Salk, who I just mentioned. I think I met him in 1984. Muhammad Ali was before 1984.
What'd you ask Muhammad Ali?
I don't remember. It was more like just how. Well, first I was surprised that he was as big as he was, because he's so elegant, in the way he boxed and communicated, and I was shocked at how big he was. It was more like I asked him dumb. I don't remember. It was like, where do you live, and why are you? How are you able to find how are you able to find a stable environment while you're traveling all over the world? And how do you have the discipline for how do you have the discipline for the kind of training that you have to do? And I would of course ask him the same question as I asked Jim Lovell. are you ever fearful? And they both said no.
Muhammad Ali said no.
No.
So someone's punching him in the face.
He said no, and Jim Lovell said absolutely not. And so did all the astronauts that we use in our astronaut training school for Apollo 13. No. I said, does any part of your physiology change? No. I go, you're trying to tell me that your pupils don't dilate and something. They just kind of held to no. I didn't interrogate Muhammad Ali on that level because I didn't have wasn't able to do that. But
that could have been a big gap too. Like you were young and he was.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of other people that was pretty. Of course, Princess Di. That was a huge disparity in power.
And that's one where you were very playful. Like you said, right? You were not going along with royal decor at all. Yeah,
I was very playful because I thought this is a once in a lifetime chance. Once in a lifetime. How am I going to be able to have a real connection with this person? And I thought to myself, look, she's got to be interested in the mischievous stuff of gossip and Hollywood, and she has to be. So I started with a conversation, like sort of Hollywood gossip with her. And then, as you know in the book, I escalated to the point where I said, do you think you can get me a bowl of ice cream? Because there was no ice cream for dessert with this black tie dinner of 350 people or so. And she said, sure. And she got it. And then I said, why don't you share it? And I handed her my spoon and she...
Was everyone shocked? Like the waiter?
People were shocked. Everybody was shocked. It was so trippy. But she did it. And it was but I thought the only way I'm going to have impact on her and the only way I'm going to be able to create a memorable exchange with each other is to not be a conformist.
So
not be scared and don't be a conformist.
So it seems like hand in hand with curiosity, and this comes out in the book, but it's not really expressed in the book, is this aspect of playfulness also. Curiosity is we're back to being a kid a little bit. Why? But that goes along with the playfulness of a kid.
Yes, it does. And it's sort of, you have to relax yourself so you can smile. I mean, smiling, having an open nature to you is pretty helpful too. But you're right. It's playful. And I never thought of it you thought of it. I didn't think of it.
Well, I'll give you credit also. I got it from your book. So,
I know.
So it seems like the other important thing, as you mentioned, and I'll bring it full circle, is that you started off with you wanted to get out of your comfort zone every day. And, gratitude is kind of very, and you mentioned gratitude, but that's a very easy way to stay in your comfort zone. Like, oh, I'm really happy with the way things are. I'm grateful for this. How do you push yourself to go from gratitude to, okay, now I'm going to twist things just a little bit so I'm out of my comfort zone?
Okay, a couple things. One is I just don't want to atrophy in any way. I mean, we know as guys that if you don't exercise, you kind of atrophy. It's the same thing with your brain. And anyone knows that your brain, it's just the same thing. Gratitude is more like this for me. Gratitude is I wake up and I go, wow, I'm so lucky to have grown up in this country, for one, to have the freedoms that we all are awarded. Gratitude to me is being just physically capable of walking, running, climbing. I'm born with all the fortunately physically, and everything's intact. So I want to use it all. I mean, I want to use my physicality. I want to use my mind. How do I use my mind? I mean, I didn't ever look when I went to my first year of college. My speech professor took me aside. His name was Mr. French. Said, "I'm going to recommend that you quit college. I don't really see that you have any functionality that's valuable here at college. You're not going to be able to integrate. You're not going to be able to survive. I think you should go to an occupational school. I say this to you as someone that cares about you. It's just not." So that stuck in my mind. Of course, I stayed in college, graduated college, but it was emblazoned in my mind. And so I wasn't a very good public speaker, but I now do it quite regularly because I just want to continue. I love to test myself because nobody is disallowing me from testing myself.
But now you've had such great success for over such a long, consistent period. What do you do today to test yourself? Like, what do you do tomorrow to test yourself?
Believe me, I have a lot. I do.
Like, what's one thing?
Today I just FaceTimed the guy that's head of Google Ventures. FaceTime. And this guy knows every deal. He's seen every deal. He knows the metrics on everything. And I'm just trying to keep up with him. I'm having this exchange. Oh, sorry. I talked to him, David Crane. But before that at 9:30, I met the creator of another Google company called DeepMind. And DeepMind is the far and away the greatest sort of AI think tank in the world. Categorically higher than any Rand, Northrop, and it's called DeepMind. They have 400 of the greatest scientists and PhDs in the world working at DeepMind. So because I met him 6 months ago, I arranged to have a conversation with him. Today, he's in England. I was in LA at 9:30 in the morning. It was so gratifying. DeepMind is the company and went to Korea and played the game Go and beat the Koreans.
Sure, that was amazing. It was the first time a computer ever beat the world champion of Go.
And what was so beautiful is that he explained to me that his level of humanity and sensitivity to the game he was able to enter all the different facets, including the spiritual dimension of what Go was really about. And so when they won, it wasn't thought of as an aggressive act. It was thought of as a collaboration, that they were learning from each other, the Koreans and DeepMind. And I thought that was really powerful, that it was a beautiful kind of symmetry that occurred.
So that's an amazing thing that you.
So
that
you said, what have I done? I did those two things so far today, and I met you, and then I'm off to having lunch with Tina Brown, that was once the editor of Vanity Fair and the New Yorker.
Well, sounds very exciting. I'm so happy I read your book, and I recommend A Curious Mind by Brian Grazer to anyone who's listening to this. Plus, I recommend watching Arrested Development at least like 6 times over and all your other stuff. So thanks again for agreeing to see me. I actually approached you about a year ago, I guess when the book first came out, and we couldn't arrange it, but now I'm glad we did. And thanks for joining me on the show.
You're so welcome. Great conversation.
Yeah,
awesome. Thanks.
For more from James, check out the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network at jamesaltucher.com and get yourself on the free insiders list today.
Hey, thanks for listening. Listen, I have a big favor to ask you, and it'll only take 30 seconds or less, and it would mean a huge amount to me. If you like this podcast, please let me know. Please let the team I work with know. Please let my guests know, and you can do this easily by subscribing to the podcast. It's probably the biggest favor you could do for me right now, and it's really simple. Just go to iTunes, search for The James Altucher Show, and click subscribe. Again, it will only take you 30 seconds or less, and if you subscribe now, it will really help me out a lot. Thanks again.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. oracle.com/advance.